Ukrainian prosecutors are accusing Russia and Russian armed forces of a grisly crime. Just what is going on, and is it emblematic of a larger problem within the Russian armed forces? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay, so YouTube censors, I'm going to cover this news story appropriately without showing anything graphic. Don't demonetize me. I think this stuff is important, actually, right? And this is from the Ukrainian prosecutor general, who says that Russian troops have beheaded a Ukrainian soldier. And this is from the Ukrainian prosecutor general, Andrei Kostin, who alleged that Russian troops beheaded a Ukrainian soldier in eastern Donetsk. Ukrainian military identified this because they saw the soldier's head on a damaged armored vehicle, a damaged MRAP, during aerial reconnaissance. Ukrainian law enforcement opened an investigation to establish the facts of the case. And the UN High Commissioner of Human Rights at least has a record of 6 extrajudicial killings of Ukrainian prisoners of war in 6 months in 2023. Now, Ukraine is, of course, investigating this beheading, right? And what is interesting is that they claim actually to have identified the actual name of the soldier in it. But first off, if I am not going to watch this uncensored video, right? But if you are interested in supporting the channel, you can do so on combatvetnews.com. This is the best way to support it. It basically functions like Patreon. You guys know YouTube routinely demonetizes my content, and sometimes I'm going to say the algorithm is less kind to my videos, particularly when they discuss certain controversial topics. So if you want to support me and get access to uncensored combat footage, not pointlessly graphic stuff, but the real combat footage that gives us real information about what it's like on the front line, the tactics, the units, the locations of the fighting, you want to become a member. Any one of these tiers will get you access to the twice weekly video drops of the combat footage. Sometimes it's as little as a few hours old. But we're going to roll out some additional benefits for the lieutenant tier and above here coming up as the site is being redone. So become a member now, get in on the ground floor. Okay, so this is what I thought was interesting. The Ukrainians actually claim that the individual who was beheaded by the Russian troops has been identified. They've also discovered the soldier's body, and Ukraine alleges this is part of a planned strategy by the Kremlin. Now, the prosecutor general said his office received information that Russian commanders actually given orders, quote, not to capture Ukrainian servicemen, but instead kill them by beheading. This depicts a military vehicle, looks like a Russian vehicle with a severed head placed on top of it. But the photo can't be independently verified. Even the Kiev Independent acknowledges that. But it seems unlikely that Ukraine would roll out this kind of bold claim without pretty robust evidence. Now, the question is, why? That's the big question. Because here's the thing. The U.S. military, in 20 years of war in Afghanistan, also had soldiers who, on one hand, desecrated the bodies of enemy soldiers, sometimes posing them in sort of embarrassing or humiliating ways, and sometimes engaging in sort of exceptionally cruel behavior. Another example would be the Navy SEAL accused of cutting the throat of a wounded fighter who was a minor. I think he was 16 or 17. So, this sort of behavior is something that happens in militaries. It is a war crime, but it is not an indictment of the entire war effort. And that you can determine by the consequences, right? U.S. military very open with the fact that many of those war crimes were prosecuted. Many of the people that did it were charged with crimes and taken to trial, right? They were seen and identified as abhorrent and violating the military's internal standards for conduct. Now, that doesn't mean the U.S. military always goes after its war criminals, right? You might remember the Abu Ghraib incident, something that actually was many historians consider to have galvanized the Iraqi resistance to American forces. And that incident, the only people charged were low-level soldiers, specialists. And those of you that have served in the military understand that egregious abuse, like what was documented in Abu Ghraib, is not something that is dreamed up by the specialists alone. The commanders essentially got off scot-free. Many of them continued their careers, despite having obviously failed in a core aspect of the moral mandate of a military leader and a military officer. So the U.S. military is not like immune to this kind of behavior, but the fact that the Russian military is not acknowledging that this happened, is not investigating it in its own right, should tell you right there that the military, the Russian military, at least permits this kind of behavior. And from what we've seen of Russian military culture, it just makes sense. They have very little code of loyalty among soldiers. They have very little training at all, and they're notorious for recruiting from penal battalions, individuals who have already conducted crimes. Now, what hasn't been established is whether this event that Kiev is alleging is a desecration of an already killed combatant or a brutal way of killing a captured POW. While both are bad, one is significantly worse and would reflect, again, a deeper, more systemic problem within the Russian military. Now, you may be like, does Ukraine do these things? I think almost certainly. The key difference is that Ukraine has a tremendous incentive to maintain a high standard for the law of war, mainly because Western countries can only back a condition of their aid is that Ukraine follows the law of war. And so, therefore, Ukraine, to avoid sort of the political environment in Europe and the United States souring on them, has a tremendous incentive to, again, behave. You cannot behave perfectly, but Ukraine will sit there and go, these are the standards of how soldiers are how enemy combatants are treated. And when they fail to do so, there is a process for charging and penalizing soldiers that violate the law of war. Anyway, guys, I'm going to keep you updated on this story as it develops, as we learn more. But again, a huge thank you to everybody. Be sure to subscribe to the video, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and join us on Combat Vet News. New video just dropped today, and it's honestly pretty wild. See ya.